And what of these other numerous peripheral anonymous witnesses which Joanne Ingber claimed supported the allegations against Jeanette? A close analysis reveals extreme bias and misrepresentation. For instance, Joanne Ingber claimed that she carried out an investigation with the staff. Can you explain what's going on, as it is very coincidental that we carry out an investigation asking staff what advice they'd give to a new member of staff about to commence work on Unit 1? Majority of first responses are "watch your back." Unfortunately, this is referring to your behaviour on the floor.
When she said the majority, I thought everyone was against me. I thought, why would my friends say that? All I wanted to do was to go home and not come back to work.
This claim that the majority opinion from an investigation with the staff considered Jeanette to be a problem in the workplace was probably the most damning accusation made against Jeanette, particularly as it came from the investigation team themselves and was clearly intended to be supportive of the allegations made against Jeanette. Let's now look at the documentation.
The majority, as emphasised by Joanne Ingber, turns out to be 2 of 3 people she had approached. And who exactly were these people? From the evidence withheld from Jeanette's investigation, we discover that out of 300 plus staff members, Joanne Ingber decided to approach those specifically pointed out to her by Mr. Ighodaro. People who Joanne Ingber already knew from documentation had met up with Mr. Ighodaro and had been gossiping about Jeanette. Guaranteed negative statements.
This was then to be portrayed to Jeanette as the majority opinion of some kind of fair and balanced investigation with the staff.
They allowed Jeanette to walk out of that building following her dismissal, believing that the majority of staff were against her. When I started inquiring into these unsubstantiated witness statements, Joanne Ingber was to state that one of these statements was hearsay and had not influenced Jeanette's dismissal. The question then is, why did Joanne Ingber use it as evidence for her majority staff responses? And why did Karen Johnson refer to it as corroborating evidence of Jeanette's verbal abuse of residents and falsely claim to Jeanette that it had been part of an investigation and had been looked into when it clearly hadn't? There was also some serious concern regarding the second of these 2 documents. I've had a statement with regard to another member of staff, and she was thrown verbal abuse from you for apparently no reason. Jeanette stated that she was honestly unaware of any such incident. Joanne Ingber was to state, however, without any elaboration, that there were witnesses. Jeanette, not knowing who witnesses were, how many there were, where they came from, was unable to challenge Joanne Ingber's claim. However, the documents do challenge that claim. When the accuser was interviewed, she mentioned nothing about witnesses. I also have verification from the Federation's legal advisors that I have had sight of all the documents in this case. And there are no other references to this incident whatsoever. These anonymous witnesses that Joanne Ingber referred to in order to justify overriding Jeanette's denial did not exist. There were no witnesses. In fact, when I started to investigate the many discrepancies in these witness statements during legal proceedings, Joanne Ingber was to falsely declare that her witnesses needed safeguarding from me and issued instructions that I must not communicate with any of the witnesses involved with the internal investigation.
Another peripheral witness was to single Jeanette out as the only member of staff on the unit that Mr. Ighodaro had a problem with. Now, as soon as this person started talking, Joanne Ingber knew from the suppressed information that this person had absolutely no idea of what was going on the unit. Joanne Ingber knew that Mr. Ighodaro claimed he had problems with at least 5 other members of the unit. Joanne Ingber also knew that other members of staff had experienced the exact same frustrations dealing with Mr. Ighodaro's disobedience and incompetence as Jeanette had. She was absolutely no different from the others. In fact, this witness herself had had a lot to say to colleagues about her own frustrations working with Mr. Ighodaro, the very reason that Jeanette gave her name as one of 3 witnesses to support her. Jeanette had thought that this person was her friend, but she was now to claim to Joanne Ingber that she had a good relationship with Mr. Ighodaro. Karen Johnson at the disciplinary meeting was to ignore Jeanette's insistence that this person was not telling the truth, that she was painting a rosy picture. She never considered for one moment to call a number of witnesses who could have corroborated what Jeanette was saying. Instead, with all the other documents of related issues suppressed and withheld from Jeanette, this was portrayed to her as though it were a single, one-off, isolated incident, unconnected with anything else, and was used as evidence of Jeanette's bullying of Mr. Ighodaro. And what of the credibility of this particular witness? We have her boasting in front of a video camera of her assistance in the attempted theft and damage to Federation fixtures.
I'll get up for the chair. She's unscrewed it. It's all electric, like the things you've got on in there.
We also have her boasting of the inappropriate way she speaks to the residents' relatives. We even have her having a lot to say about management themselves. Some of these clips have been posted on the internet in support of the Justice for Jeanette campaign. And even though I disguised her voice, members of staff still recognise her characteristic gossiping tones. The credibility of witnesses and their statements was of very little concern to the investigation manager. The only criterion appeared to be anything hearsay gossip as long as it was negative about Jeanette. And this unsubstantiated personal rant fitted the bill perfectly. Jeanette's second witness confirmed her statements of the frustrations of dealing with Mr. Ighodaro's incompetence and disobedience. This was never to be referred to. The third of Jeanette's supporting witnesses, well, the management didn't even bother questioning her. Another very impressive bundle of anonymous witnesses was to be presented to Jeanette.
It has been alleged by 6 members of staff that you are in a mood often, and therefore staff feel as if they have to walk on eggshells, as they are nervous and feel intimidated by the way you speak to them.
Again, without names, times, dates, places, Jeanette was completely unable to respond to these allegations. All she could say is that she didn't know. Sometimes she was in a bad mood, but not all the time.
Joanne Ingber emphasised that it was 6 different employees giving 6 statements.
Joanne Ingber again left out the fact that they were composed of Mr. Ighodaro and those he had specifically directed Joanne Ingber to.
In their quest for negative-only information, the investigation team ignored a very important remark made about Jeanette by one of these anonymous accusers, and that is that she was crying a lot in the workplace.
The pro bono professional HR officer who is assisting us with this investigation considered that the management's failure to investigate such an important statement, which clearly indicated that something was very wrong, was a major omission in this career-destroying investigation. She also reminded us that the ACAS code states that investigations should be conducted into the domestic background of accused persons if it might help to explain certain behaviours in the workplace.
Check if there are any special circumstances to be taken into account. For example, are there personal or other outside issues affecting performance or conduct?
But the fact that an employee of the Federation of Jewish Services was crying a lot in the workplace was to be of no concern to the HR officer conducting this particular investigation.
They said anonymous witnesses said I was in the mood and everybody had to tread on eggshells. Afterwards I thought it was at the time when there was a lot going on in my life. I'd just been to the funeral of my nan and was very upset when she died. At the time my mum and I were suffering long-term harassment by thugs on our estate who was vandalising our property and my car. We had to go to court about it and it was very upsetting. My mother also went into hospital with kidney problems and I was worried sick about her. I remember crying a lot at work because of all the stress. My friends at work knew about these things and supported me. We found out afterwards that one of the witnesses had stated that I was crying a lot. Management never asked them, my friends or me, about any of these things. They just made it sound like I was evil and bad.
Without the slightest intentions of carrying out any investigations, these statements concerning Jeanette's moodiness and crying a lot in the workplace were instead used as corroborating evidence of Jeanette's intimidation and bullying of the staff.
Even one of the unit managers considered that Jeanette's moodiness did not unduly affect her work with the residents nor her interaction with the staff. Do you believe that staff are intimidated by Jeanette's behaviour? No. Does this have an impact on residents? No, she may just be quieter. This fair and balanced statement from one of the most credible witnesses at the Federation, who had worked with Jeanette for the best part of 10 years, was also not to be referred to at the disciplinary meeting.
There were no statements, of course, from any of Jeanette's friends and colleagues who were supporting her through this difficult time, witnesses who would have provided the investigation team with a balanced picture of what was going on, witnesses who could have helped them establish the facts. The collecting of negative-only witness statements in order to support allegations is apparently very common in internal investigations. It's the old devil or angel trick. Collect information only to make somebody appear a devil, or collect information only to make them appear an angel. And this is very evident from the management's priority to question those pointed out to them by Mr. Ighodaro himself.
And this is the reason the ACAS Code advises on such matters. It is important to keep an open mind and look for evidence which supports the employee's case as well as evidence against.
The ACAS Code played no part in this investigation, and it was to be of no concern whatsoever to Karen Johnson, a disciplinary officer appointed by the Federation of Jewish Services, who was to state under cross-examination that she wasn't even familiar with the ACAS Code.
Mr. Ighodaro in fact stated that there were no witnesses to his allegations, except 2 senior members of staff who he claimed witnessed the alleged bullying of Mr. X. I have never had sight of any statements from these 2 senior members of staff. The Federation ignored all repeated requests to have them identified so that they could be questioned. The Federation would not allow me to investigate Mr. Ighodaro's claim during legal proceedings.